I want to talk to you today about a Christmas Eve I will never, ever forget. You see, I am Clara Jackson's, and at 63, I've learned that nothing, absolutely nothing, hurts more than betrayal, especially when it comes from the people you raised, the people you love more than life itself. This story begins not with me, but with my sweet granddaughter, Audrey. She's 28, a dedicated graphic designer, and she works so hard for everything she has. She bought a little house in Colorado Springs, a real fixer-upper, and she was so proud of owning it. But life, as it often does, threw a big, cold curveball her way. It was Christmas Eve dinner at my house. The wonderful smell of pine needles mixed with the cinnamon and the bourbon-spiked eggnog I always insist on. We were all there. My son Stephen and his wife Diane, busy helping me in the kitchen. My younger son Logan was sprawled on the couch, lost in his phone. And then there was Audrey. We had cleared the main plates, and the room was settling into that quiet, happy anticipation before gifts. Audrey stood up, walked over to me and hugged me tight. She's always been so thoughtful. That's when she made the mistake that shattered everything. "Grandma," Audrey said, smiling right into my eyes, "thank you so much for the $500 you sent last week. It really helped with the last contractor payment." I put my fork down slowly, deliberately. I looked at her, and the confusion was immediate. It was sharp enough to cut the sudden silence in the room. "500?" My voice was quiet, but I heard the edge in it. "Audrey, the gift I sent you was $200,000. I watched the color drain from her face. My sons Stephen and Diane froze completely. Logan actually stopped chewing. I felt a cold, cold dread settle in my heart. I knew instantly that a thief was sitting at my table. Audrey grabbed her phone with shaking hands and opened the banking application right there, next to the turkey platter. She scrolled through the history, her breath hitching. "Deposit, $500, she read, her voice thin, almost a whisper. That was all. 199,500 gone. I looked around the room, letting my gaze rest on each person. I said the words slowly, clearly, so no one could mistake my meaning. That money didn't disappear on its own. Someone in this room knows exactly where it went. If you've ever had someone you trusted completely stab you in the back, right in your own home, you know how that Christmas Eve ended. Hit that subscribe button and keep watching, because what happened next destroyed my family forever, and the person who did it was sitting 3 feet away from me the whole time. Let me back up and tell you why I sent that money. 2 months earlier, the heavy snow in Colorado Springs had brutalized Audrey's little house. She called me, distraught, explaining the roof had failed and water was pouring through the ceiling, ruining the floor she had worked so hard on. The roofing company quoted her $18,000 for a proper replacement. She was 28, living alone, and only had about $4,000 saved. For weeks, she tried everything, but the black mold was creeping up the drywall. She had no choice but to call me. She hated asking. I could hear the pride and shame in her voice as she explained the damage. But I listened, and then I laughed softly. I told her, "Audrey, you're my granddaughter. You don't ask family for help. You let family help. I was going to wait until Christmas, but I'll send it now so you can get that roof fixed before the next storm." I asked for her Zelle banking information. I prefer those instant modern transfers. And I told her I would transfer the full $200,000 immediately. That money was meant to secure her house and give her a proper, safe cushion for her future. 2 days later, she received a notification. She opened the app, expecting a life-changing number. Instead, there was a single deposit, $500. The memo line read, "Love you, Grandma." She stared at the screen. $500. She thought I had changed my mind. Prideful girl. She simply texted a quick thank you and never brought it up again. She scraped together the rest, maxed out her credit cards, and signed the contract for the roofers. She had no idea the full $200,000 had already left my account, and that someone else had rerouted almost every penny before it ever touched her savings. Back at the Christmas Eve dinner table, the atmosphere was suffocating. Audrey's hands were shaking as she showed the pathetic $500 deposit on her screen. I looked at my son, Stephen, who coughed and immediately looked away. Diane covered her mouth. Logan stared at the floor. "I hit send myself," I confirmed, my voice now deadly cold. "That money left my account. If it isn't in yours, then somebody here made sure it never arrived." The key detail was the Zelle transfer. The money had moved instantly. It meant that whoever intercepted that $200,000 had access to Audrey's electronic banking details, or had manipulated the transfer as it was happening. And the only people who knew about the money and who had been close to Audrey lately were in this very room. I reached for my own phone. My resolve was firm, even if my heart was breaking. "I'm calling the authorities right now on Christmas Eve," I announced. "Because family or not, I want every penny accounted for." I dialed and put the police dispatcher on speaker. I told her plainly, $200,000 had disappeared, and the suspects were all sitting right here. 2 patrol cars arrived less than 15 minutes later. The red and blue lights pulsed against the fresh snow outside. They separated us into different rooms, taking statements. By the time they left, the celebration was dead. The Christmas lights still twinkled, but the warmth was utterly gone. No one spoke. The suspicion, thick and cold, had settled over our family. And I was about to find out exactly which of my children was capable of robbing my granddaughter and betraying my trust. After that terrible Christmas Eve, trust vanished completely. Every time I looked at Stephen or Diane or my grandson Logan, I saw the same terrible question hanging in the air. Who among us is the thief? The day after Christmas felt colder than the snow outside. A detective, a calm, methodical man, came back to my house. He sat at my dining table, still scattered with pine needles, and explained what the bank had confirmed. The full $200,000 had left my account instantly, as a Zelle transfer should, but within 3 seconds, it was rerouted through an anonymous middle account, split, and vanished completely. The trail went dead somewhere offshore. The detective used phrases like sophisticated forwarding rule and someone with direct access to the receiving device. I heard the same thing everyone else did. This wasn't random. This was calculated. This was personal. I sat there focusing on my son, Stephen, and his wife, Diane. They kept exchanging glances that lasted just a little too long. I leaned forward, my voice low and firm. "If either of you knows something, say it now. The time for secrets is over." Stephen rubbed the back of his neck, his nervous habit. Diane stared at her coffee cup like it held the answers. Finally, Stephen confessed. "Logan's been gambling on sports again," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "He swore he'd stopped after college, but last summer he came to us asking for help. He owed around $40,000 to some online bookmakers, and the interest was killing him." Diane rushed to his defense. "We gave him money a few times, just enough to keep the collectors away. We thought if we handled it quietly, he'd learn his lesson. We didn't want the family ashamed. My face hardened. $40,000 in debt was a tragedy, but it still didn't explain $200,000 missing in one swipe. I looked at Logan. He hadn't said a word since the detective arrived. His knee bounced nonstop, and he wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. I spoke first, directing my anger at him. You knew your sister Audrey was waiting on that money to fix her collapsing house, and you sat here smiling on Christmas Eve, knowing what you had done. Diane reached for my arm. Mom, please. We can still fix this quietly. Call in more attention. I cut her off. My voice was iron. No, I called the police because I wanted the truth, not a cover-up. If my grandson has a problem, we are far past quiet. Stephen tried to intervene. Let's just give it a few days. We'll sit Logan down, figure out where the money went. It was Audrey who finally found the courage I lacked. Her voice was steady, utterly cold. There's nothing to figure out. Someone in this family stole from me, from Grandma, and the two of you have been protecting him while I was taking on debt to patch my roof. Silence fell again, heavier than ever. Diane started crying softly. Stephen looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. I stood up slowly. Until every dollar is accounted for, I announced. Nobody leaves this house thinking we're still the same family we were 2 days ago. That was the moment the crack in our family became an unbridgeable canyon. The truth was there, but the denial was destroying them all. Mid-January brought a week of sub-zero nights and almost no sleep for Audrey. She kept replaying the detective's words, access to the receiving device. Her laptop had never left her possession except when Logan borrowed it. The more she thought, the more certain she became that the key was sitting in his small apartment. Audrey waited until a Wednesday morning when she knew Logan would be at work. She still had the spare key he'd given her years ago. She let herself in, her heart pounding. She went straight to his desk. His laptop sat closed, no password. Logan never bothered with security at home. The desktop was a mess. She started opening anything recent. A spreadsheet titled 2024-25 season showed columns of bet dates, amounts lost, amounts still owed. The final total in red was horrifying, $198,000 and change. She kept digging. In a folder buried 3 levels deep named Old Code, she found the file labeled Forward Rule. It was a short script, the kind of basic programming Logan learned before dropping out of college. The code was chillingly simple. One line read, if incoming, 5,000, then redirect 199,500 to Cayman Act. Another line listed Audrey's exact Zelle-linked email address as the trigger. He had even left a note to himself, so arrogant in his crime. Test with small amount first. Grandma always does that. Audrey sat back, physically ill. He'd watched her struggle with contractors, watched her take on debt, and all the time he knew exactly where the money had gone. He'd built the trap himself, greedy and calculating. Her hands shook as she took photos of every screen, every line of code, every bet and ledger. She immediately emailed the entire set to the detective from Logan's own Wi-Fi, making sure the IP address and timestamp would be attached. Then she wiped the chair and walked out. By the time she reached her car, the detective had already replied, "We have enough for a warrant. Do not confront anyone yet." Late January arrived. Audrey texted everyone the same message. "Come to Logan's apartment tonight at 7. No excuses." I replied instantly that I would be there. Stephen and Diane tried calling Audrey, frantic, but she let it ring out. Logan never answered at all. When they walked in, the tension was unbearable. I sat straight-backed in the only armchair. Stephen and Diane shared the couch. Logan hovered by the kitchen doorway, arms crossed tight. Audrey didn't waste a second. She connected her phone to the television screen and hit play. The first slide was the betting spreadsheet, the ruinous red numbers. The second was the folder named Forward Rule. The third was the exact line of code that stole the money. She let each image sit on the screen long enough for them to absorb every terrible word. Logan's knees buckled. He dropped straight to the carpet, his head buried in his hands. Diane let out a sound of pure agony. Stephen just stared at the screen, defeated. "I did it," Logan finally confessed, his voice cracking. "The debt was almost $200,000. They were going to hurt me. When Grandma said she was sending money to you, I panicked. I thought you'd be fine for a few months." Diane reached for him, sobbing. "We should have told someone. We should have forced you into help." Stephen finally spoke, barely a whisper. "How could you look your sister in the eye every day knowing what you'd done?" Audrey stood perfectly still. The room smelled like old pizza and fear. "I'm not here to listen to excuses," she said, her voice like ice. "I'm here to say goodbye. Mom, Dad, you chose to protect him instead of me. You watched me take on debt while he spent what was supposed to be mine. Logan, you're not my brother anymore. You're just the person who robbed me and let me thank the woman he stole from." I, Clara Jackson's, hadn't moved the entire time. My eyes stayed on Logan, cold and steady. Audrey kept going, her voice cracking with the finality of it all. "From tonight forward, I have no parents and no brother. Don't call, don't text. Don't show up at my door. We're finished." Diane tried to stand, reaching out. "Audrey, please, no." "No," Audrey replied, her voice flat and final. Just then, the front door opened. 4 uniformed officers stepped inside, the detective from Christmas leading the way. He held up the warrant so everyone could see. "Logan Bennett, you're under arrest for wire fraud, theft by deception, and aggravated identity theft." Logan didn't fight. He stood up slowly, his hands already out for the cuffs. Diane collapsed against Stephen, both of them crying too hard to speak, their secret exposed for the entire world to judge. I watched the officers lead my grandson away, and I did not blink. Audrey grabbed her coat and walked out while they were still reading him his rights. The hallway air was cold, hitting her face like a slap of reality. It was a cold welcome, but it was finally free of lies. February turned into a blur of federal agents and courtroom dates. The case moved from local police to the FBI because the money had crossed state lines into that Cayman Islands account. Agents interviewed Audrey for hours, walking through every screenshot, every line of code, every desperate bet Logan had placed. They managed to recover some of the trail, enough to prove exactly where the money went, but almost none of it came back. Offshore accounts are built for exactly this kind of disappearing act. The final report said less than $4,000 was ever recoverable. The rest of my life-changing gift was gone forever. Logan took a plea deal in late spring, 7 years in federal prison, no parole for the first 5, plus restitution he would never be able to pay. Audrey didn't go to the sentencing. She didn't need to see him in an orange jumpsuit to know justice had finally caught up. My son Stephen and his wife Diane lasted 4 more months under the same roof. The fighting never stopped. Every conversation circled back to blame, anger, and regret. One morning in June, Audrey got a text from Deanne saying they had filed for divorce. They sold the house Audrey grew up in before the ink was dry on the papers. The wreckage Logan left behind was total. I called Audrey to my house in early July. I looked smaller to her, I know, but my eyes were clear and sharp. I slid a thick folder across the kitchen table. Inside was the new will, signed and notarized the week after Logan's arrest. "Everything that's left goes to you," I said simply. "Roughly $9 million after taxes and the trusts I already set up for charities. Logan is out. Stephen and Diane are out. You're the only one I trust not to let my money destroy another life." Audrey tried to protest, telling me she didn't do any of this for inheritance, but I waved her off. "I know exactly why you did it, Audrey. That's why it's yours. You did it for the truth." I asked only one thing, that she keep visiting me until I was gone. She promised she would. By August, Audrey had the house on the market, her car packed, and a one-way plane ticket to a city she'd never lived in before. She changed her phone number the day the sale closed. Diane tried the old one a few times, but Stephen never did. Logan's letters from prison went straight into the trash, unopened. Audrey and I talked every Sunday for the next 4 years. I passed quietly one October morning, just like I wanted. Audrey was holding my hand. Audrey used the inheritance to buy a small, safe place with a view of the water, to pay off every debt she'd ever had, and to start a design studio that answers only to her. Some mornings, Audrey still wakes up expecting a text from her mother asking what time dinner is, or Logan asking for $20 for gas. The silence that follows is the loudest sound she's ever known. Greed didn't just take $200,000 from her. It took her parents, her brother, every holiday memory she thought was safe. But it also gave her something she never had before, a life where no one can hurt her with family loyalty again. Sometimes the worst betrayal is the only thing that finally sets you free. The wisdom that comes with age taught me that Logan underestimated Audrey's determination. He thought the quiet ones were easy targets. He was wrong. My life's lesson is that family bonds, when tested by fire, either break completely or become unbreakable steel. Audrey and I chose steel. To everyone who stayed until the very end, thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening. If you've ever been hurt by the people who were supposed to love you most, please share your thoughts or your own stories in the comments. You're not as alone as you think. Like this video if it hit home. Subscribe for more real stories, and I'll see you in the next video.